Hello there, and welcome to the recording of another episode of Search Marketing Scoop brought to you by Semrush. So, this is the preamble before we get going properly. This is, of course, producing a podcast live, an audio podcast live. You can see us do it. You can partake in the discussion live as well. So, hopefully, if you're watching us live, that will add more value to your experience. So, we'll get going properly in a couple of minutes' time. In the meantime, if you're watching us live, hi, thank you so much for joining us there. Maybe share in the chat what you've had for breakfast this morning, perhaps what you've had for lunch, depending on where in the world you happen to be, and maybe your name, perhaps what area of search engine optimization or paid search is of particular interest or concern to you at the moment. We are live indeed. The first comment within the chat there. So share your thoughts hopefully in the chat if you're watching us. We have quite a few viewers already. I know it takes a little time from me saying something to you hearing it. There's about a delay of about 15-20 seconds when you do a YouTube live, and then of course time for people to chat. So takes a little while to get a bit of communication going, but I'm sure we will do just in a little bit. In the meantime, I'll give you a little bit more to chat about. And I've been having a little look at the Semrush sensor tool. And you can find that at semrush.com/sensor. And I thought it was quite interesting that within the sports category of websites, for the last week or so, there's been a lot of flux. So I was going to ask the question out there, has anyone out there who is working in this particular niche experienced a lot of flux within the rankings of their websites? So as you see on the SEO Sensor tool, the carousel and top stories are getting a lot of changes. The top stories, of course, is the flux, the changes within the different domains that we see there. The carousel sections, the section of images at the top of the site there. You can see on the left-hand side, other industries, arts and entertainment has seen quite a flux. So that's a bit of an interesting set of changes that we've seen over the last week or so. So if you have seen something yourself that concern you or please you about your own websites, rankings that you're working on, please share them within the chat, and you can perhaps even get your comment read out. Talking about comments, we have got a tweet within the chat. If you have a look at the tweet within the chat and you can retweet that, you will get an Semrush t-shirt. Wow, there's an offer for you there. So click on the tweet within the chat. You'll get a free t-shirt. An interesting comment here. San Diego Hot Limos and Party Bus. Homepage content. Me's thinking that content isn't necessary anymore. Being beating out to people with no content scratching head. Maybe a couple of spell check issues there. I'm not sure, but I get the gist of what you're saying there, which is essentially, is it necessary to publish a lot of content on your homepage anymore? Or is the homepage simply a matter of building your brand and then you publish the bulk of your keyword-rich content, if you're thinking from an SEO perspective, on other pages on your site? So I guess that would be an interesting topic to get our guests' opinion on. Yes, we do have a couple of cracking guests. Hello, Carlos. Glad that you could join us there. Thank you so much for joining us. So we've got 54, 55, and the number of live viewers are increasing nice and steadily. So that's nice to see. So that means that we can start the proper show itself. So I mentioned, of course, we're recording an audio podcast as we do every couple of weeks here for Search Marketing Scoop. If you go to searchmarketingscoop.com, that'll redirect you at the moment to a post on the Semrush website. And within that post, you'll see links to subscribe to the podcast on both iTunes and Android. So whatever your preferred flavor of podcatcher, you can subscribe to the audio show as well. But I am going to start the proper introduction there and get going with the show as proper. And as I do that, I will be introducing our guests just in a second. People also search for suggestions are now appearing in ad results. Google's mobile search results now show thumbnail images 45% of the time. Google's Hotel Ads now joins the rest of their ad family. And Google Image Search tests delivering the same mobile and desktop design. Broadcasting live in the SEMrush YouTube channel, this is Search Marketing Scoop, the SEMrush show that brings together the top PPC and SEO folk to discuss the current search headlines and how they impact you. I am your host, David Bain. Let us meet today's guests. So first up, an inspiring Indiana Jones. He's a digital marketing speaker and trainer and the founder of Polestar Digital. Welcome to the Scoop, Ned Poulter.
Hi, David. Thanks for having me.
Hello, Ned. Thanks for joining us. And next up, a unicorn among a sea of donkeys. He recently sold his first business WordStream for $150 million, and he's still working. He's the founder of MobileMonkey. Welcome, Larry Kim.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me, David, and hello, Ned.
Thank you, Larry. So let's go back to Ned for story number one, and that is Google's mobile search results now show image thumbnails 45% of the time. So, Ned, is this a big rise from where it used to be, and is it maybe likely to be a long-term trend?
Two really good questions there. I think, first off, actually, when we're talking about some data from Rank Ranger, which is showing this huge spike over the last 7 days, which, if I'm totally honest, when it comes to whether it's a long-term change or not, I don't believe it will be. But I do think it's an increasing trend that we are going to see, such as seeing more mobile specific, richer search results when it comes to using smartphone devices. So we've seen kind of increasing amount of carousels, news stories, tweets now in SERPs, like they used to be back in the day, and images increasingly coming through. It just makes it more user-friendly, so it isn't just your traditional old-school list of 10 blue links, because, of course, we know that mobile is the future. It has been for a very long time now, and it just makes it that much more interactive. In terms of the kind of whether we're going to see this, actually Google does and rolls out quite a sweeping change, which does show this kind of uplift of suddenly they're showing images across a huge amount of SERPs, and all they'll be doing there is gathering the data from the users and seeing how people are interacting. Most specifically, I would hypothesize in terms of what keyword types that people are interacting with, whether it's informational, transactional. I seem to think that it makes sense to include images for certain SERPs and not for others. And I have a feeling that the large rollout or the huge increase that's been reported kind of in the news stories that we're discussing is actually largely down to them just rolling out quite a blanket big test to gather data to then iterate beyond that.
Interesting. I mean, we've obviously seen Google test things before and change their SERP results before. We've seen 3 or 4 or 5 years ago them having author images beside blog posts, and that didn't stick around for too long. But I mean,
spammed to death. That's why.
You got what to death? Sorry,
got spammed to death. That's why.
Well, hopefully this is less likely to get spammed to death. Do you think that these thumbnails are likely to result in a much higher click-through rate, or only for certain industries?
No. So again, what I would temper that with is what type of search the user is conducting, because I personally think there are certain search results, and I was doing some testing just last night, actually, in preparation for this myself, some guerrilla testing on my mobile and trying to trigger some image thumbnails in SERPs. And it tended to be informational SERPs that, from my very limited testing, that had thumbnails in the SERPs, such as I was Googling a bunch of names of footballers, like Andre Schürrle is apparently moving to Fulham. So I was Googling him, and the direct thumbnail linked through to the Wikipedia article. So that made sense because I was looking for information about that footballer in particular. And it kind of, I suppose there's validation there with an image of the footballer that enable me to click through and probably increase the click-through rate myself. I pulled up a couple of figures, though, anonymized clients figures, actually, just to kind of show the impact and also where you can check the click-through rate specifically on your own website when it comes to image search. Because if you dig into Google Search Console, you can actually filter by search appearance and images. And you can see what the click-through rate is like, at least as Google reports it to you. And just two examples just to share, just to illustrate and answer your question there, David. So first off, we've got a client website that probably gets about 15,000 a month. Just filtering between search type image, they have nearly 32,000 impressions and 40 clicks off them. Wow. So that's an average CT2, which is non-existent. And then to go from a more transactional perspective, an e-commerce client site that we work with that gets about 120,000 uniques per month. If you filter that by image, they get nearly 100,000 images, but only 385 clicks. So that's still a 0.04 click-through rate from that, which is obviously, it's not a huge amount. It's not going to get you kind of optimize everything for images, because I think irrespective of the landscape change, I think it still shows that images are shown an awful lot, but whether or not they're clicked on is a different matter.
Okay. Well, we're getting you cutting out just slightly there. Hopefully we're not going to have an increasing trend of that happening throughout this discussion. But I'll give you the heads up if that continues to happen. Just one further question in relation to this. You mentioned that you were doing a search for a football related to story. I assume that means that news type results were appearing. If so, does that mean that you're more likely to be able to take advantage from your image appearing as a thumbnail if you have a fairly authoritative domain name, or can any website potentially take advantage of this?
I think the way that it will be implemented by Google and rolled out after this testing period, which is what I'm hypothesizing on, is that the authoritative site will only be the one that it shows a thumbnail for. I think you're going to really struggle to influence that unless you have that authority in the first place, because otherwise they just open themselves up for abuse in the search. We mentioned with kind of authorship before, and I actually think that was a separate kind of objective that they were setting out on there.
Yeah, absolutely. I would have thought that as well. So work in your site authority first of all before trying to tweak it for conversion rates and rich media.
Yeah, and when you talked about news results as well, especially so, we see that commonly. If you are in the UK, you're going to get a lot of very known UK publications there rather than just any sites. Typically, anyway, there are certain search results that wouldn't drive that. But
well, let's go over to Larry for story number 2, and that is Google brings hotel ads into its own umbrella of Google Ads itself. So first of all, I guess, Larry, most people won't really be aware of hotel ads. What are hotel ads?
Sure. Before we go to hotel ads, can I just add one little comment for the previous section on the images? So in AdWords, you can run shopping ads and you can run text ads for the same keywords. Okay, so shopping ads include the image and the text ads don't include the image. Okay, I mean, you guys were talking about what's the difference and how does it impact click-through rates and this stuff. So like an easy way to test this is actually just using AdWords, where you run the same ads, but one with and without the image. What happened was, of course, the images get a little higher click-through rates because, you know, it has to do with the prominent positioning and everything in real estate. But one of the surprising conclusions that we found was that the image ads were converting at substantially higher rates, like two 2.5 times higher than the like the text ads. Okay, and so the reason is that's because when you convey the image, it's like, it's like a blue dress or something like that. Like what they're saying is when they click on that, they're saying like that's the price range that I want and the design that I'm interested in. You see what I'm saying? And they click on that and they're like ready to buy. Whereas if it's just a text link, their mental model hasn't fully formed in terms of they don't know what they're clicking on, and so it's harder to figure this stuff out, but it has a profound really meaningful imagery can have a profound impact on conversion rates by pre-priming the mental model of the searcher to conditioning them to know what they're looking for when they click. That's exactly what they were expecting. So I just thought that was kind of interesting.
That's a much more interesting thing to talk about than hotel ads, isn't it?
No, we can talk about hotel ads.
No, I know. I tell you, just in relation to what you were saying, I remember one of the first internet marketing courses that I ever got was back in about 2005 or so, a course by a guy called John Reese called Traffic Secrets. And he was a big advocate of buying Google ads to test the click-through rate and conversion rate of different keyword phrases, and with a view to knowing which keyword phrases to use for SEO afterwards as well. Of course, it's much more expensive to do that now as well, but it was interesting because I thought that the way you were suggesting there in testing shopping ads against text ads and understanding the difference in terms of paid, you can take learnings from that to apply within organic as well.
Yeah. This is such an interesting thing. One other thing I would add is that because search is zero-sum gain, like there's only a certain number of people who are actually ready to buy something at any point. Those conversions that the shopping ads stole, like with their images, they actually came at the expense of all the other listings. So we looked at the organic listings and the paid listings, and like their conversion rates actually dried up substantially. Because the people who were predisposed towards buying were actually navigating directly to where they wanted to go, and the people who didn't want to buy were just clicking on whatever, just the show me the whole the whole selection or something like this, and they had lower likelihood to convert. But anyways, back to our story. We're talking about hotel ads. This is like you said, it's something that if you're Expedia or Booking.com or something that you would have heard of. If you're not in this niche, then it doesn't really matter. Typically, when Google comes up with these new ad products like Gmail ads or YouTube ads or Google Shopping, they usually roll it out outside of AdWords. Okay, they have like a separate interface for where people do this kind of stuff. And I guess the big news is they're kind of rolling that right back into AdWords. And so what that just means is that it's kind of past the beta stage. This is pretty typical. If you're doing AdWords and something outside of AdWords, that means they haven't fully committed to it yet. Will it? The hotels, I think we were talking earlier. It's really a difficult space. I mean, you're paying $3, $4, $5 a click in the U.S. And these hotel rates are like $150 or $200 a room. And if you have a typical 3, 4, 5% conversion rate, you're probably not making that much money, or if any. I don't know what do you want to know? Like what are the specific questions?
I'm interested in how this may impact user behavior in the future. So if we're talking about Google making it easier to advertise on their platforms such as Maps, what impact may that have on consumer behavior? Can you say more consumers booking a hotel directly within Maps or from interacting through Maps, or are they more likely to stick with a brand such as Booking.com that they happen to be registered with?
Sure. So Maps is an incredible property. It's like over 1 billion monthly active users, and there's only a few products in the world that have over 1 billion monthly active users. So with Maps, if you're in the hotel industry, it just gives you a chance to show up ahead of all the other organic listings. It's just kind of like doing what PPC in search ads did to the organic results. So like there's definitely value there. It's just challenging for I don't think it's that difficult for a pay-per-click advertiser to set up, because it's kind of like Google Shopping, where you don't even have to you don't have to specify any keywords, and you don't have to specify, it's all automatic. It's just all it picks the keywords for you and such. So it wasn't really that crazy complicated. It's just, I think the challenge is just trying to get this ROI model to work, because I think what a lot of the big users of this technology are like Orbitz and Expedia, and I think they're just trying to crowd out the organic results because they can,
And they have an affiliate model as well. Do you think it's likely that Google may move towards that kind of model, or is it more likely that they're still going to be sticking with pay-per-click?
I think it's just what I said. Like, there's a couple big travel agencies that can afford to do this, and big brands. But like for these little, I've really struggled with like these little Airbnbs and things like this, trying to get them on AdWords and make the returns work. It's really hard because it's very competitive. That's all.
Okay. So if you're in that kind of market, you've just got to optimize your own sites and the platforms that work for you and do the best job within that, rather than actually trying to compete with players that have massive budgets and can spend more because they make more money.
And because they have higher conversion rates, because the conversion rate is associated with the brand affinity of the hotel chain that's being, people tend to, it's your preferences are going to be reflective in that conversion rate. Like if you just randomly pick on some Airbnb thing, like it's going to be a low conversion rate. Whereas if you pick the Four Seasons or something, then that's probably what you're going to buy, because you've probably experienced that brand before.
Well, let's go back to Ned for story number 3, and it's image related, but a slightly different image story, and that is Google Image Search tests delivering the same mobile and desktop design, and they've also updated the refer URL to help publishers track image search traffic. So, I mean, I think you alluded to this a little bit earlier on, Ned, but is your opinion that it's not really possible and worthwhile for websites to be focusing much of their time on trying to drive traffic through Google image search?
No. That's not what I was getting at all.
Okay.
I think the main thing what I was getting at was, I think the rewards for doing so are pretty low in the grand scheme of things. I think explicitly the answer was given when you said about, would you rather focus on website authority as opposed to optimizing images, for example. And I think that, yeah, the riches that you can kind of acquire through just optimizing images is not going to pay the bills. But this is quite an interesting one, because I actually think of all of Google search products, particularly over the last 18 months, their image search product is really impressive. And what I mean by that is actually just the interface. They've done quite a few iterations in how you can manipulate and utilize image search, including things like filtering on quite broad categories by color, which is really interesting. So if you are shopping and you're starting your journey for example, dresses or something quite commoditized that you would just be browsing quite broadly for, that's when it gets really interesting, because from a usability perspective, it's super cool to use. There's also some really interesting advanced features, which obviously incorporate things like machine learning from Google's side of things, where if you're searching on an Android phone or within Google's image search app, you can actually search by image and it will recognize the image. I had this last weekend. I was in Lisbon, and through taking a photo on his Android app, my brother-in-law, it flashed up with a result from Google saying this is the whatever church it was that we were stood outside sightseeing, and clicked through to see more information, which is pretty truly special, because that's kind of Star Trek stuff, right? Where you take a photo of something and it can tell you what you're taking a photo of, even though it's not necessarily the same kind of image that they will have. They just know through the amount of images that they have that is what you're looking for. So when it comes to this bridging gap between mobile and desktop, I think we know that anyway. I think that goes without saying. Oftentimes they're going to lead with mobile first anyway. and desktop will just follow suit. And especially what's quite interesting here is they've also been testing a layout which looks incredibly similar to Pinterest, which has been written about. I'll share it on Twitter after. It was an article on TechCrunch. And actually, if you think about their kind of long game here, image search platforms, they will be going for the likes of Pinterest there. And actually, Larry mentioned shopping ads there. They blend them in with image search results now anyway. So what we have seen is you can have certain shopping campaigns that are running, and as long as they're set to run on search partners as well, they will run as part of image search. So you can attack it in a two-pronged way. When it comes to kind of optimizing for it, though, some of the basics are just like good naming structure, naming what the image is of, can be particularly powerful, especially so as we've seen it in niches. So transactional queries, things like product codes, think kind of really old school SEO, optimizing for them. If someone's searching for a product code, they're looking for that product.
So the file name is important to be reflective of the keyword phrase. But alt text, is that still important?
Yeah, I think you should incorporate them. The only thing as I say, it depends how much effort there is to implement these things, because a lot of CMSs don't actually make it particularly easy to influence these factors. But yeah, file name and alt text, I would always recommend doing. Just kind of cross the bridge of whether it's going to be worthwhile doing it across your 100,000 images across your site, and whether you're actually going to see uplifts there before doing it.
Okay, there was a great question from Direction Inc. in the YouTube chat saying, question for Ned or Larry, thoughts on advertising outside Google Ads, such native advertising, and if that kind of traffic could be positive for SEO since Google sees a lot of traffic to a site. So I don't think the question is necessarily about native advertising. It's more about buying traffic from different places and whether that surge in traffic could result in higher organic rankings. I actually interviewed Rand Fishkin about a year ago or so, and he said that he'd noticed from traffic from emails an increase in rankings over a short period of time. And let's ask Larry as well. Larry, have you seen any organic ranking increases as a result of paid traffic driving? Sorry, Larry, are you muted there?
Sorry, yes, I did mute. Yes, so I have definitely seen this, what the guy's talking about. You know, it sounds crazy, but there is a ghost in the machine, I think, where if you see a surge in traffic in one source, unrelated to like link building or whatever, that your SEO benefits from it. And I think it's kind of an indirect, it's an indirect relationship wherein what's happening is if you're buying all this advertising or buying all this traffic, it just creates brand affinity for you and your business. Okay, and we know that click-through rate is dramatically impacted by brand affinity. Like people, you know, will click on the brands that they've heard of before. And so I think, you know, there's sort of this indirect effect where, you know, if you do a lot of email marketing, or if you do a lot of, you know, traffic acquisition from other sources by sponsoring, I don't know, podcasts or whatever, it just more people then end up hearing about you, and then that just creates brand affinity towards your site, so that they're more likely to click on the listings that you have, if that makes any sense. I'd be interested in what Ned thinks.
Yes, Ned, sorry, what are your thoughts?
I was going to say, I think the correlation between traffic boosting organic SEO, I think, is probably a bit more of a hypothesis, and I've not seen anything which has led me to believe that. But I think what at least Larry was getting to there is brand affinity and trust signals, and a lot of what SEO has kind of come full circle is branding, basically development of branding. And even whether you focus on links, just branded mentions, or even auxiliary exercises, like Larry mentioned, things like sponsoring podcasts or even doing broader branding activations, I definitely of the mindset that definitely positively improves SEO, but I wouldn't say it is the cause for higher rankings. I think that's a bit trying to be a bit too binary with something that is much bigger than that.
I guess you could also say that you've got to consider the secondary actions that users take as a result of visiting your website. They're not necessarily going to buy something, but perhaps they may share what you do in Facebook or do some other action that gives your site that little bit more organic presence. And as a result of doing that, perhaps the paid traffic does have the SEO value. Maybe it's indirect rather than direct.
It's something that is more an attribution case then, because ultimately we don't live in a world increasingly online where people Google something and they buy it straight away, right? We research. So, and brand is just a consideration that comes into that customer journey. So hence why, yes, investing in brand is certainly going to be powerful, because even like we were talking about with hotel ads, it may develop brand affinity and people are there's going to be a much higher conversion rate for those brands. But it's difficult to filter that down across every website on the on the internet.
Well, the final story. Sorry, Larry.
I did some tests on that where you you can do it in paid. It's hard to do it in SEO. You basically use RLSA. That's search remarketing. So what you're talking about, like, what's the impact of brand affinity on like click-through rates and conversion rates, right? Well, you can use RLSA to buy the same keywords to two different audiences: people who've heard of you before, who visited your site recently, and people who haven't heard of you, who've never visited your site before. And just exact same ads, same bids, same position, everything. Just people who've heard of you versus not, and the cohort of people who have heard of you. Like what we found was it was around like 2.2 to 3 times higher click and conversion rates. So I think the brand has an enormous impact on CTR, which I think is actually very valuable. It's obviously valuable in paid search, but I think it's extremely valuable in organic search too. And it definitely impacts the conversion rates like crazy.
So can you take those differences in conversion rates or click-through rates that you get on paid search and doing the testing, the cohort who have heard of you and haven't heard of you, and can you apply the same principle to organic traffic, and that if they've heard of you, then you can put that financial value on building your brand online?
I think that you'd be smart to do that. I mean, that there's, just because it's difficult to measure in SEO doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Like, you can construct similar experiments that kind of test the same hypotheses in paid, which has better instrumentation, and then you could extrapolate those types of results for organic search ads or organic search results, because they're identical. Like, the new ads from last year, they look identical to organic listings, in every way.
Well, we've got the one more story to go, and that kind of blends organic with paid as well, because recently Google have started to show people also search for suggestions within ad results. Obviously, we've seen that within organic listings, but now we're seeing it in between paid ads here. So, Larry, why are Google actually doing this?
Sure. This one was reported in the last couple of days. It's nothing new for organic search, but they're seeing it in paid search, like the people also search for. I think a couple of people, like a couple PPC people, were a little annoyed at this because, it's basically showing a bunch of links to click on that aren't your ad. You know what I mean? Like, I think they would rather just have all the attention and focus on that ad and not show any other links to other search queries. In terms of like, does it matter? I think it might be a little annoying, especially if the suggested keywords include like competitor names. Like if you're searching for like Citizens Bank and then Santander Bank shows up in the people also showed as. But the thing you need to realize is that particular feature is only activated on high bounce rate. Okay, so like you have to do a search and it doesn't show up right away. You have to click on the link and then hit back right away within like 15 seconds or so, and then that feature appears. And so like it's kind of like those exit intents that pop up only when the guy was going to hit back or close the window, right? And so the way I look at it is, advertisers shouldn't be annoyed because you had your shot, and it wasn't what they were looking for, and basically, it's actually giving advertisers another chance, because if they do choose one of those suggested keywords, like there's nothing saying you can't just add those keywords to your keyword lists in paid. You know what I mean? It just, it takes 2 seconds. So I kind of think, and what you could do is you could send them to a more specific page as opposed to just the generic page. So this answer box, like the suggested search, only shows up for sort of these generic car loans types of queries where query reformulation is applicable. And so I think that's it's just really valuable information from Google to kind of help you understand, like, why your ads aren't working, and where you should be sending them, and what types of keywords you should be going after instead. And of course you could use that information for SEO as well. Like any other thoughts or questions on this?
Yes, well, I mean, I'm thinking it would be useful for all those data to show up within Google Ads, so you can actually see specifically the searches that people preferred to click on rather than actually click on your ad, and that would assist you in making your ad, I guess, more relevant to the user.
Well, there's tools like Semrush have keyword analytics, and it does show kind of related terms, and I think it's pretty close. Like, essentially, I think the data is there either through Google Keyword Planner or tools like Semrush. It's just more of a missed opportunity to use the data that we have, to actually do those segmentations and create those ads. Like, for example, if an advertiser created site links, and something like only a quarter of advertisers are actually using site links, it's ridiculous. You could create those site links that could navigate people to more specific deep links into your site, rather than sending them to a generic page, having them saying, like, this wasn't what I was looking for, hit back.
Should every text ad be using site links?
I see no reason why not. Like, it's just free real estate, and even if they aren't clicked on, okay, it does raise the click-through rate of the headline, of the ad, and then in PPC, you kind of live and die by your click-through rates. If high click-through rates, it's but good ROI, bad click-through rates is terrible ROI, usually.
Well, a lot of great information shared in this episode, but that just about takes us to the end of this 12th episode. Just time for an actionable tip from each of our guests. So it doesn't have to be necessarily related to what we've been discussing. It could be something else that they've been working on within their businesses. So let's go to Ned first. So Ned, what is your actionable tip?
So one of the things that we didn't specifically touch on when it comes to optimizing for images is structured data markup. And obviously with product and article schema in particular, they're the most likely you'll be able to select an image and actually just say in the structured data in the schema, this is the image I want you to show if you happen to show images in the SERPs. So if you're not utilizing structured data on your website, I would look into it, particularly if you're an e-com business or a news business. Product or article schema, look it up. I can share the links after, but they're pretty easy to find them through Google. If you are embarking on that journey, I'd recommend trialing implementing via JSON, via Google Tag Manager. It's the less tech-involved version and can mean that you can just layer it on and test it without actually pushing it live. We've done that very successfully with clients. Test it using the structured data testing tool that Google offers. That will tell you whether there are errors in your structured data. And if you've got keywords that you're specifically trying to get that position 0 for, you can track what structured data is being shown using Semrush or other tools like that, which if you go into the structured data section, which I think was in beta or at least a while back, it's probably rolled out into alpha and live for everyone now. But yeah, that will allow you to see how you're influencing the pages that you're implementing structured data on and where you're showing structured data in the SERPs.
That's an extra actionable tip from Ned there. Thanks for sharing that, Ned. Really good. Now, we've had one more question that's come in, so I'll just read that out and actually get Ned to think about it as Larry gives his actionable tip, and then if you could give a very quick answer to that, Ned, after Larry, that would be appreciated. So the question is, are you continuing to see Google experimenting with shorter meta descriptions? Depending which website I'm editing, the Yoast plugin has both long and short character limits. Any advice? So you're going to have a little think about that one. And in the meantime, let's go to Larry. Larry, what is your actionable tip?
Sure. So I started a chatbot company called MobileMonkey about this time last year. And basically, it's you know, people get their information on messaging. All right, full stop. Like more people get their, more people use messaging than social media. What's crazy is that a couple of things. The open rates on messaging is ridiculously high. 70, 80, 85% is very typical, and response rates, it's 20 to 30% is pretty typical. Compared to email marketing, my open rates are 10 to 15%, and my click rates are usually around 1%. So I think it's just crazy that people aren't jumping on this messaging bandwagon. It's very simple to do. You use a product like MobileMonkey, and you can create chat blasts to all your subscribers to like promote the latest blog posts or whatever. And if you're listening to this podcast, if you just email me at larrykim@mobilemonkey.com, and I can give you a free 12-month subscription. Just email me.
Wow.
I'll give you a free 12-month subscription for $600 value.
I think I'll be emailing Larry afterwards.
It's larrykim@mobilemonkey.com, and I'll take care of you. All right.
I was going to find you can find Larry over at mobilemonkey.com, but I think that's quite clear by now. Wonderful offer there from Larry, and also wonderful advice. So thanks for joining us, Larry. Ned, have you had an opportunity to have a think about that meta description question?
I have. I mean, one of the things is meta descriptions. As SEOs, we always kind of came up with the character limit that we would recommend. I know people that recommend more or less, but it was always within a range, specifically when it comes through something like Yoast's plugin for WordPress, which is exactly what the question was referring to. But actually what I'm seeing increasingly is longer meta descriptions. That's when good structure has been implemented on the page, oftentimes by structured markup, which I mentioned before. But actually, Google is finding something that is actually a better use and throwing that out under your title tag as part of the SERP that's not necessarily a meta description. And actually, we did this to ourselves because it was over optimization and oftentimes blanket optimization of meta descriptions across a website that took Google to discredit those and say, actually, this isn't really what that page is about. You're just trying to get someone to click on that link. So I am witnessing it. I think that was the question. Am I seeing it? I'm seeing shorter, especially when it comes to mobile SERPs, consider the mobile first and indexing from that perspective. But I'm seeing longer as well. So I think it's just something that it's Google's prerogative whether they want to show it.
Yeah, so what you're saying is don't necessarily try and go for the longest possible. Think of what offers the optimum user experience and just try and offer that.
There are a lot of tests out there, which I won't go into. I know even some of the tests I've read that Larry's mentioned or Larry's presented before when it comes to PPC messaging don't have to be so obvious like a PPC or the perfect SEO humans. Try and speak to your customers. You might actually entice people better than looking like all of the other links in the SERPs, which is just saying, click here, buy now, save 5%, etc., etc.
Great stuff. Well, of course, you can find Ned over at polestardigital.com. I've been your host, David Bain. You can also find me over at digitalmarketingradio.com. We will be recording the next episode 13 of Search Marketing Scoop at the same time, same place, the Semrush YouTube channel on Wednesday, the 8th of August. That's in 2 weeks' time. When my guests are scheduled to be Steve Wiedemann from wiedemann.com and Marty Weintraub from AimClear. In the meantime, thanks not only to Ned and Larry for this episode, but also to you for tuning in. If you liked what you heard, subscribe to the audio podcast. So head over to searchmarketingscoop.com and find a link there to your preferred Apple or Android flavor of podcatcher. And of course, if you're already a Search Marketing Scoop audio podcast subscriber, tell us what you think. A rating and review inside your podcast app would be very much appreciated. But until next time, be fantabulous and do one thing that scares you. Adios.